Chris Williams said it's time to go, so it's time to go. Everybody, it's Tuesday. It's 7 o'clock. It's time for Conversations with Commodores. And I have got a recognized man on the screen with me tonight, coming out of Glenn, Louisiana. Same high school as Warwick, Dunn, and some others who made it into the league. But Chris was all world for the Commodores back in the early 2000s, and the 14th pick of the Bears in the '08 draft, played for several teams, several years, and now happily resides with his beautiful family in the Nashville area. Chris, thank you for joining us tonight on Conversations with Commodores.
No, thanks for having me. I'm glad you reached out. I'm excited to do this.
Well, we're excited to have you this evening because what the purpose or what we're doing with our group here is we're trying to tell the oral history of the program. And so far, we've had more than 150, almost 170 different conversations. And we're just trying to preserve the history of the Black and Gold program. And I'm so glad that you're joining us tonight. I want to make sure that we're pushed live into our Facebook group. So let me take a look. There we go. All right. I know you guys know this fella. He was moving defensive players left and right for the Black and Gold, and then took his talents to the pros. Chris, again, welcome to the program. I know that we've all got our eyes not only glued to our conversation, but the Commodores Coach Stack's group has been off probably about right now. So I'm sorry for the combination of what's going on, but from time to time, maybe you can give us an update. But before we really get started, guys, y'all got to take a look at Chris's shirt, because it just it is the shirt to wear. We don't do orange, according to Dansby Swanson and the rest of us. That's awesome.
You know, my wife doesn't wear a ton of Vanderbilt stuff anymore because she went to Tennessee State, but she has this in a t-shirt and a hoodie. She likes it.
Oh, nice. Chris, we got Tyler Unzicker, Mark Matlock, and Nicole Smith are on with us already this evening. So thank you, guys.
That's awesome. If y'all see me looking, that's what I'm looking. I got the basketball game on behind my computer, so I'm trying to. I just saw Shane up there. It's Presbyterian. We should be all right.
Yeah, hopefully. I saw Shane at homecoming this weekend, and I just love what he's doing in the community, still giving back, still so very important to all of us with the Black and Gold. But Chris, let's kind of work our way backwards in your timeline. Tell folks what's going on in your world today.
Oh, like I was just telling you, we have 4 kids. I got a 12, 9, 7, and 2. Girl, boy. So we've got basketball and soccer and baseball, and they play a little bit of everything. So we just ripping and running with kids in school. And my wife trains horses. We got a horse farm out here in Robertson County. So we do a little bit of everything. I try to make it to practice pretty often too, and check out the offensive line as well. So I'm a little bit everywhere. So.
Well, it sounds like you got a full household and you guys are having fun, and doesn't sound like there's a lot of laying around in the house with the Williams crew these days.
No, well, I'm actually glad it's starting to cool off now. I won't spend so much time on my mower anymore. I end up cutting a lot of grass in the spring and summer. So I'm glad everything's dying and all the bugs are dying. So it'd be good for a little while.
Well, Chris, let's talk about you showing up at practice. I bet those offensive linemen, when they realize who's in their presence and seeing what they're doing, they're probably a little more crisp with their feet, probably a little more attentive with their hands, not holding. What kind of attention do you get these days when you're actually in there and mixing it up with the guys?
Oh, not too much. I try to stay low key. Earl's there, so Earl's a big deal. I just go hang out with Earl. He's a celebrity around there, so I just go blend in and kind of just check out the offensive line. I like what Coach Blazek teaches. I think he teaches it the right way. So I enjoy spending time with him. And obviously, Coach Lee, we were teammates. Javon Hay, me and Larry Black have some mutual friends. So I got a lot of connections in the building. George Smith with Black and Gold Club. We were teammates. So, just get to go hang out, see what's going on up there.
You talk about a high energy guy. The offensive line coach, Coach Blazek, is just I love what he does, and I follow him on social media. I've met him a couple of times, but he brings the energy, doesn't he?
Yeah, he gets after it. He's the same every day. He's extremely consistent with them and what he demands of them. So, you know, I enjoy spending time with him and that group. So,
Did I hear you say you kind of blend in when you go up there? Come on
man,
now.
you got to see how big these kids are, man. I'm small.
Well, that's what I was going
Yeah,
to ask you. I know you're nowhere near your playing weight. You probably have slimmed way down in the last 7 to 10 years, but you're right. These boys are big boys, aren't they?
I think they get bigger every year. At least that's how it feels. You know, I guess getting away from it, they just because I'm down like 265 now,
Mhm.
and I mean, these guys are walking around 330 ish, 320. It's some big kids. They're all some big, and they just feel like they get bigger and bigger. And I'm glad I don't have to hit them anymore. That's for sure.
But isn't it crazy? Those guys who were 300 plus, they're cut. I mean, they look good at 300 plus. They're not flabby. They're not like the old, they're not sloppy looking, is my point. They look like real athletes, even though they're that big.
Hey, there's no need to bring Josh Eames into this and talk about his body. You know, Josh is a great player, man. There's no need to be talking about people's body types. That's not right, Bernard.
Oh
I love
man.
you, Josh.
Oh man. Guys, we're just chopping it up with Chris Williams. Chris played in the early 2000s with Dr. Earl Bennett, with Javon Hay, with a whole bunch of black and gold players who were in the building, as you mentioned. It must seem like just, I don't know, y'all could probably put together a pretty decent squad just with who's in the building when you come over there, because those are some really fine contributors for our teams over the years.
Yeah, it'd be pretty decent on paper till you see us all walking around. It's like these guys can't play anymore. Like
Well, Chris,
watching Coach Hay walk makes my body hurt.
well, he does, and Javon sure got after it, and I love that Javon was on our show a few years ago now, and I've enjoyed my friendship with him in the last few years. And you talk about somebody who gets after it, not only as a coach but as a recruiter. There's no finer example to me to represent our university when they're out there trying to recruit the next wave of black and gold players. I know you're fond of Javon as well.
You know how crazy Javon wears cleats to practice half the time. You got cleats on there. Like, what you got cleats? You coaching? What you got cleats on for? I'd have died if I saw Robbie Caldwell show up in a pair of cleats. I'd have died of laughter. Like, what are you? You're gonna hurt yourself really bad. Put the cleats away.
I think Javon thinks he's still 21 years of age and can get after it.
Yeah,
And frankly,
he does.
between me, you, and anybody listening, he probably could for about 3 plays.
But he got a few snaps left in him. That's for sure.
But isn't that, don't we all think we got a couple of snaps and then we realize, wait a minute, I got a hamstring or I got a shoulder. I got kids at home. But that leads me to this topic, Chris, about competitive drive. And I've talked about this many times. It's kind of a reoccurring theme. You're coming up through junior high, high school, college, and for you in the pros, we all have competitive spirit. We have something in our DNA that makes us as athletes want to compete, want to win, want to do our very, very best. But even after you've retired and you've been out of the league now for a few years, how do you channel that same competitive drive or that fire that's still inside of you? What do you do now as a retired player?
You just have to find different avenues and different things to compete at. I coached high school for a handful of years, and that kind of filled it. I found myself around the Vandy program a lot. That'll help to fill it, to kind of scratch my football itch per se. And you try to find ways to be competitive, whether it be golf or um, video games, anything, any board games, playing cards, pool, shuffle. I mean, you just want to try to beat somebody at something. And luckily my kids always want to try to beat me in something. So but it's hard. You don't get it back. You don't get that level of competition back. So you just try to feel it in small ways as you go along.
Well, you mentioned a few minutes ago, you've got your oldest is 12 and your youngest is 2 or so. Are you allowing the 12-year-old to beat you in any sports just yet?
No, she's not ready. She's not the athlete. She could play circles around me in the piano. That's her thing, but she's not the athlete. Now my 9-year-old son, he thinks he can beat me in everything, but he don't have a chance. And that's why I'm saving one. You say we all got a couple snaps left. I got at least one for both my sons, so I
Well,
got to save a couple for them.
I got news for you. Those days are coming quick, and they're not going to stop coming. But Chris, what are you coach dad, or are you just dad, or how do you handle your boys who may be playing some sports these days?
It just depends. It's been a little bit of both, and it'll be a little bit of both. I don't necessarily love coaching my sons. I'd rather somebody else do it. I'd like to keep that line. My dad coached me, all the way up until I got into high school, pretty much. But uh, because of my competitiveness, I'd like to be able to stay in the dad role and let us keep that relationship and work outside of it, as opposed to being coached, because I don't want to scar him for life.
Well, I think all dads who have children, boys or girls, who come up through any type of sports, if we as dads played sports competitively, it's inherent in our nature to be able to coach them up. But there does come a point, like my daughter played lacrosse all the way through college, and I never played lacrosse, so I had very little, if any, really authority in her eyes. It's more like, why don't you go sit over there with your buddies and let my coaches come? And I learned very quickly. So anyway, your days as you seem to be ahead of the game, so to speak, if you're want to just be the dad role. So I wish you the best on the upcoming years with that. But Chris, we got some more Commodores are in the house. We got OJ Fleming is in the house. We got Kenny Cole, we got Dwayne Jones, and of course, guys, we got Chris Williams tonight is in our conversation.
You got a good group. Made me wish I was on Facebook. I can keep track of all these guys.
Yeah, you need
I'm
to.
not getting on Facebook though, but it's a good group though.
Well, Chris, let's talk about life and growing up in Glenn, Louisiana. What kind of a town was it? Tell us about your sports experiences up through high school.
Oh, it was a little bitty town. We had a post office. I think that's what put us on the map. It was a little tiny town. We out west of Baton Rouge, and just a little town, little subdivision next to a cattle farm. Backing up, grew up a mile from Mississippi River, so I grew up playing baseball, a little basketball, people basketball, but mostly I wanted to be a baseball player. That was my background, and that's what I love to do. And went all the way up until I didn't start playing football until seventh grade. Played seventh and eighth grade. Didn't play ninth grade year. Wanted to just focus on baseball, and then ended up going back. My dad strategically took me to every high school home game that year for my high school, and I went to Catholic of Baton Rouge, like you said. So it's a pretty strong football tradition, and 800 boys at that school at the time, and 200 of them would have been in the football program. So ended up starting playing again my sophomore year of high school, and played football and baseball through high school. Had a conversation with my baseball coach after my junior year, and he was like, "Hey, football is the way to go. You're gonna get a scholarship." And then I think my first letter was from Army. Vandy was my only SEC offer. I remember when Coach Johnson came to my high school. I was recruited by Warren Beeler, and I remember Coach Johnson coming to my high school during track season and stuff, and getting the offer, and was but football and baseball mainly. Played a little basketball growing up, but mostly football and baseball.
Chris, as a youth, when did you hit your growth spurt?
Oh, that's a crazy story there. So I was milling around. About my dad's 6'4", and so I was probably, I think I was about 6'1", 6'2", about my sophomore year of high school, and my knee was bothering me. So between my sophomore and junior, we go see this doctor, and they're like, "You're growing too fast." And I got this thing called Blount's disease, and so my growth plate on the inside was closed, but the outside was open. So my leg was just irregularly bowing. Well, they put these staples on the outside of my knee, and then I grew like 4 inches that summer. So I went from 6'2" to 6'6" in the summer, and that was my growth spurt. And then so I spent my whole junior year trying to learn my body again, and ended up playing my senior year.
Wow. Well, I'm sure that
But
was.
that doctor told me, Tulane, he told me I'd never play football again when I was like 13, 14 years old. So
Well, I guess not all doctors know all things. But Chris, growing up, what colleges or what sports programs did you follow, or did you have like certain teams or certain players who you tried to follow or pattern your games after?
I grew up outside of Baton Rouge, like I said, so we went to Southern University football games. The SWAC team right across the river. A lot of my family members went to school there, so we would go watch. Because Pete Richardson was a coach, and Southern had a storied program at the time, still do. So that's where we go watch football, and I would go watch LSU baseball games. They were like the pro team down there. So go to Alex Bach once or twice a year, get to see them play. They would take our baseball team about once a year to watch LSU play baseball.
Newsflash, they still are.
Yeah.
Very good program. And frankly, if it's not Mississippi State that Vanderbilt's competing against each year, it's going to be LSU. I've loved the baseball rivalries that have developed in the SEC. Chris, did Southern or LSU or any of the regional schools recruit you?
LSU didn't. And it's funny, Nick Saban was there at the time when I was going to high school with his son, and we had a couple guys going. I just wasn't big enough. I was 230, 240 coming out of high school. I just wasn't. I think I got 2 stars because Vanderbilt offered me. I just wasn't big enough as a player. And Southern, I had a conversation with a recruiter from Southern, and they were like, frankly, HBCUs wouldn't offer it. Like even 1AA's wouldn't offer me because they knew I wasn't coming. Because I had D1 offers, like we're not even gonna waste the offer because we know you're not coming. They're like, I mean, if you want to, sure, we'll give you one, but they're like, we know you're not coming. So,
did you ever seriously consider West Point, or was Vanderbilt really the tried and true team? Excuse me, school for you?
no, not West Point. I don't think I was built for the Army lifestyle. If that was the only one I had, I probably would have made it work. Just to go somewhere for school for free, but. Vanderbilt and Oklahoma State were probably my top 2. Those are the 2 visits I went on, and I had Georgia Tech and Northwestern and Memphis as well. I had a couple teammates go to Memphis, but Carl Dunbar was recruiting me to Oklahoma State, and he's a great coach. He's been all over the NFL. He's been at Alabama a couple of times. Great D-line coach, great recruiter, and I really liked him a lot. And Oklahoma State pulled my offer. Like right after my visit, they tried to hotbox me and they pulled my offer. And Les Miles was the coach there, and that's a strange dude right there.
Yeah,
he was a coach at Oklahoma State. It was a weird meeting, but so they pulled my offer, and then I actually got physically ill through that process. Coaches calling you and hey, you should come here, that kind of stuff. So I ended up coming to Vanderbilt. We visited. My family liked it. We liked the staff. I liked Nashville, so. We pulled the trigger on Vandy. It was like it's the SEC offer. So,
well, I from everyone who ever played for Coach Johnson, I guess the 2 or 3 things that folks say about him is that he's a player's coach. He was good to his players, and he cared about his players. And I don't know if you had that same relationship as a lot of others did, but a lot, not everybody, but most everybody who's been on the show just thoroughly enjoyed playing for him.
Yeah, Coach Johnson was fantastic, man. He was a straight shooter. He didn't talk a whole lot. He was very observant, and we were like his kids. That's how he treated us, like his kids. So everybody kind of gave him flack with the no cussing thing and thing like that. It was just such a different trend at that time, but that's genuinely who he was. And I appreciate Coach Johnson and was a great coach. And I really enjoyed playing for him and Coach Caldwell. They had a pretty good staff at that time. So some good assistants on their staff.
And you had some pretty darn good offensive players at the time. Were you always slated to play on the offensive line, or had they ever considered defensive line for you?
No, it was always I played defensive line for like 2 days in high school. I was terrible at it. So I've been offensive lineman my whole life. So I was always they saw my dad was 6'4", 275-ish at the time, walking around. So I don't think they were really worried about me filling out. They just wondered how long it would take, but they knew I could put the weight on.
What about once you got to school, you didn't make an immediate impact. You had a bit of a journey. So take us through that first year. or so of getting acclimated and just getting used to being in Nashville and on campus. Some of us never get acclimated. Some of us have a very difficult time. Others, it's like a duck to water. They just immediately are in their environment. Kind of take, for folks who don't know, kind of take them through, or take us through that first year or so for you.
Oh man, that was my first time being away from home, and I got a pretty strict parent, so I had a good time my freshman year, man. I was this close to being a statistic. They tried to kick me out twice. Excuse me. I came in, I was an engineering major. That was a mistake. They tried to be white, tried to talk me out of it. Miss Elizabeth tried to play it. They're like, no, you don't want to do engineering. I was like, no, I'm gonna be an engineering major. I'm smart. This, that, and the other, because I had this high ACT score and I was one of the smarter kids in my school. I had no idea what like Vanderbilt smart was. It was like a whole different level of smart people out there. But I thought I was one of them. So I started engineering. That was a failure. My GPA my freshman year was less than 1. So that's where I started at. And I had a good time though. I was always down to hang out and play Halo. Halo was big at the time, all on LAN, no Xbox Live. So yeah, if I couldn't play football, if it wasn't for Hurricane Katrina, they would have sent me home. Because my second year, I was screwing around again. I remember going home from Maymester. I went home right after April was over. I get a call. They're like, you got to come back from Maymester. You need to get some credit so you can be eligible next year. Because I was ineligible. My redshirt freshman year, I was supposed to start at center that year. Mm-hmm. And I was ineligible. And spent that whole year going. And so the next year I'm going into the summer and they're like, okay, you need to get it together. And I got called back, had to come back to school, and then Katrina happened. And so we had about 18 people or so sleeping in my parents' house at the time. And we wrote this letter and stuff, and they gave me another chance. And I had met my wife, and she was my girlfriend at the time, but she's my wife now. We've been married about 15 years, and just started kind of getting my head on straight and taking it serious and going to class. I didn't go to class. I had all these 8 o'clock classes, never made any of them. You know, golly, it's terrible marketing. I remember going to a calculus exam when I was in engineering school, and I sat down and I looked at this exam, and it looked like Greek. And I put my name on, turned it in the left, and I was like, I had no idea. No idea. I was a terrible student.
Well,
terrible.
But Chris, at some point, you had an epiphany or a moment or something that turned your experience for the better for you. Was there something specific, or was it just being the threat of losing your scholarship and being kicked out of school, or did you have a meeting with coach, or was there one specific event that led to the improvement of your grades and getting more serious with things?
Oh no, we had a come to Jesus. They called my parents up at the end of the semester. The year I was ineligible, they called my parents up, and we sat down with Coach Johnson, and it was my mom was crying and stuff, and I'm finna get kicked out of school. And so that was the wake up moment right there. It's like, man, I done screwed up big time, and I'm out of chances. So I better get this thing going in the right direction and start listening. Because I was a good student in high school, but I just never really I had terrible study habits. So I didn't know how to apply concepts and take everything. I go sit in the high school classroom, they're gonna give it right back to me the same, or they're gonna test me the same way they gave it to me. So I can sit there, watch, pay attention, and go take the test, get an A. But the applying concepts and writing all these papers and just sitting down with information and expanding on it, it was foreign to me. So once I decided that that's what, just putting my mind to it and taking it serious, then I got it together.
Was this the spring or summer of your after your second year?
Yeah, this was the
come to
summer.
Jesus meeting?
Yeah, this was the summer going into my second year. So, it was like study halls and all that kind of thing, because I had to spend that whole second year getting eligible for my third year, which was my redshirt sophomore year, which would have been like, Cutler senior year and all that. So I had to spend that whole year getting myself back eligible, getting in a good major, and just sitting down with and catching up basically, because I had wasted a year essentially.
Well, 2005 was certainly an eventful season for the team. Where were you in the mix on the line that year?
I played guard that year. What did I start at? I think I played left guard that whole year because we had I think Ryan King was the left tackle. I think Ryan King was left tackle. We had Brian Stamper was at guard. Trey Holloway was at center. And I'm trying to think who was the other guard, Merritt or Josh. I think Kobo was gone already. I'm not sure who was at the other guard, but I ended up playing guard pretty much that whole season.
Well, that year, the 05 year was a 5-6 team. I know you remember you guys won coming out the gate. You beat Wake Forest, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Richmond to start the year. You go first 4 wins, and then the next 6 games were losses until the Tennessee game.
Yeah, Coach Kane tried to get cute out there with Middle Tennessee at the house. So you bringing up old stuff, Bernard. You got me fired up over here.
Well, I don't mean to get you fired up, but we got some good things that certainly happened during that time. But now your grades are improving, you're playing, you've got some excellent players in the offensive huddle, or both sides of the field. I should be fair about that. But Chris, I want you to take us just briefly, and I don't know during that year if you guys huddled up or if you went straight to the line to get your play, but take us into a Jay Cutler huddle. Clearly, he was commander of the offense at this point. He ended up in the pros. And I want to say, weren't you and he and Earl all 3 teammates for a bit later on with the Bears? But take us into a Jay Cutler huddle, and what was that like for you?
Oh, it was good. He had command of the huddle. He was our clear leader at that time, and it was good. The offense, I think the offense ran pretty good. We left some stuff out there for sure, but he wasn't shaking in his boots or nothing. The calls came in and he put it out there, and he actually ran the ball a lot that year too. So they, like we had load options on our top goal line runs, a lot of quarterback draws mixed in. So he did a good job while he was here with what we had, and that was Earl. That would have been Earl's freshman year. He would have been a true freshman and caught a lot of balls, and that was just a really neat thing because I remember we left, we won at Tennessee, and we rode buses back. We had a fun bus ride back, and the rumor was Cut got in the limo and he came back because he was a senior, so he was going to get drafted. So he left, and we all rode the bus back. But it was just, that's kind of when the NFL became real to me. Seeing him because we went to the draft party and you saw him get drafted in the first round. It's like I watched this guy work every day, and I've seen the work he put in, how hard he works, and if that's what you got to do to get to the NFL. That's what I'm gonna do too, because I've seen him do it, so now that means I can do it too. So that's kind of what the spark was for that.
Well, take us to that Tennessee game, because that was a pretty historic win, and I know that it still lives in the minds of the black and gold family. Do you have any recollection specifically of that game or that day?
Oh yeah, the funniest things were, well, Luke Wyatt was notorious for, he played Rocky Top in the locker room all week long. So that would be the one thing with Tennessee week you knew was coming up. And that particular day, we just kind of put it all together, and it was the quietest 110,000 whatever I've ever heard in my life. And their team went ballistic. Those guys were throwing helmets and crying. I mean, they were so furious. I think we knocked them out of bowl contention as well. I'm pretty sure that year, and they weren't very happy with it. But it was just, I remember the play coming in down there on the goal line, and everybody knew the ball was going to Earl, and I don't know how he fit it. I mean, it was just like it went, and it was just everything just went crazy after that. It's like he caught it and we won. It was just it was really cool for us to put that together at that time, and I know everybody was on that team and on that field was special for them for sure.
Chris, I'm not so sure there was not a single person in the stadium or those of us watching on TV who were not aware that ball was going to Earl.
That ball was going to Earl.
Why they didn't have all 11 guys on top of Earl?
Yeah. Well, it was neat too because we had Casey Jackson Garrison was from up that way, so it was neat for him to get a win up there, and then just everybody works so hard. You work so hard at it, and to get that, we had been a long year. We had
Mhm.
been 4-0, and we ended up at that point we were 4-6.
Yeah.
We're out of bowl contention, so we could have mailed it in and been like, whatever, let's play this last game and gone back. But to get that win at that time was cool. And we got some great ones. We beat Georgia at Georgia, beat Tennessee at Tennessee, we beat South Carolina at South Carolina. They were ranked 6 when we beat them up there in Columbia. We had some good ones. We had some games we should have won. We should have beat Florida at home. We should have beat Georgia at home. We should have beat Tennessee my senior year back in Knoxville. We get
Mhm.
a roughing the punter on Broderick Stewart, and then so I got to really I can go down and listen, but we get roughing the punter and we flip the whole game, and we should have we left a few out there, but we had good football teams. I felt like we I feel like we did a really good job of competing. I feel like when you played us, you knew you're gonna have to earn it. We wasn't gonna give it to you.
Well, Chris, what those teams did, the '05, '06, and '07, you laid the groundwork for the bowl team the next year because there was such a great nucleus, sorry, of players who had all that experience, all that knowledge about how to win games, and really that's what you guys, your part of your legacy for those teams left for the '08 bowl team. But Chris, when was it that you said that kind of the seeds were planted the year that Jay was drafted, and you go to the party and all that starts to percolate in your mind. But as you got closer to the end of your eligibility, when did things get real for you from a conversation standpoint, from a preparation standpoint? It's this is a world that very few of us we get to peek into your world, but we don't get to experience what you did. But when did that get real for you?
It was like, so after '05, I remember Coach Caldwell telling me, he's like, you could play in the pros if you want to. I was like, really? He was like, yeah. He's like, you just keep doing what you're doing. He's like, you're gonna get a shot. So I'm like, keep playing. You make all conference. You just keep playing, keep playing. I'm trying to figure out. So my junior year, I kick out the tackle and playing left tackle. I go on this run of I give I think 1 sack in 2 years or whatever over the course of the next 2 seasons. And this during this process, the scouts start picking up at practice. So as you start seeing people at practice almost every day, especially when you got pads on in the spring and in the fall, watching one-on-ones, talking to you. Coach Sis would put me in front of scouts and, hey, you should work on this. You need to work on this. Try to do this. Work on this part of your game, and getting tips and getting pointers because you just felt like everybody was pulling for you. Rex Hogan's wife, Christy Hogan, worked in the building, so Rex would have pointers for me at times. And then uh, my senior year, you get the Senior Bowl invite, captain, and then I get a Senior Bowl invite. As I go to the Senior Bowl, I'm like a third round pick, and I kind of play my way into the first round between the Senior Bowl and the combine and all that kind of stuff. So you end up on this kind of roller coaster ride, and just gonna ride it as far as you can.
Well, in '05, your redshirt sophomore year that we just talked about, you're not playing left tackle at that time just yet. I don't think. I think aren't you playing
No,
right tackle?
my red shirt, so I was in left guard. I'd been playing left
Left
guard
guard.
most of that year. Yeah.
All right, so you got Cutler. You're almost the blindside tackle that year. You're at guard, but then Jay graduates, and then the quarterbacks that you're playing for now as the blindside tackle have a completely different games, I assume, or styles from Jay. Who were your main quarterbacks those couple of years?
We ended up with Mackenzie Adams, Chris Nixon, and those were the man. I feel like Larry Smith was in on the backside of that too.
Mm-hmm.
So Mackenzie and Chris were kind of the two main guys, kind of rotating through that. And Richard Kovalchek transferred in from Arizona as well,
Okay.
and he got a little run too. But we were kind of quarterbacking by committee at that point, trying to figure it out.
Well, Chris has been on the show, and Larry. I always try to look out for my Alabama guys. Larry was Mr. Football in
It's
Alabama,
football, Alabama.
out
Yeah.
of Prattville, and now he's coaching receivers at Memphis. but those two guys have been on and they've talked about the bowl team, the '08 team. But I was just curious for you, does your at left tackle, depending on who's your quarterback, does your technique have to change? Does your game change at all? Or are you still uniformly doing what you normally do, independent of who's behind center?
It's mainly the same. You might know one quarterback holds the ball a little bit longer, or he likes to escape out the pocket, so you're trying to keep him to get him to step up in the pocket, or um, just little nuances of what they like. But for the main part, you're just protecting the spot. But having a guy like Chris and McKenzie, both of them were fairly mobile, even Jay. So when you got a mobile quarterback, it helps you out playing offensive line because the defensive linemen kind of have to cage the quarterback and keep him in the pocket. So they can't just go flying upfield necessarily and creating rush lanes for him. So, and like I said, we ran a good bit of quarterback draw at the time. So that kept the D linemen on their toes. So
I bet having a mobile quarterback, as we see so much in the pros now, it seems to be one of the trends. Guys, I've got Chris Williams. Chris was the SEC legend 2016, Commodore top 100 stadium. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I could read the whole thing out, but Chris, we're going to run out of time, so we need to get back to your story. First of all, give us a Presbyterian update. What kind of score we got going?
It's tighter than I like it to be. It's 22. We're up 22-14 with 4.5 left in the first. So
all right, well,
it's not a runaway, that's for sure.
We got a whole second half away.
Only 22 points. That seems low. We must not be shooting the ball well. So a lot of fouls too. But it'll be all right.
I saw Ezra on a scooter behind the baseball field this weekend. And I almost yelled out to him, "I'll carry you wherever you want to go, man. Get off that scooter."
Get off that scooter, man.
He was just bebopping, had his AirPods on. He was having a good time. I'm like, "No, please, can you just walk wherever you got to go?" But Chris, let's get away from the field for a minute and let's talk about being on campus. We all know about that football bubble and the responsibilities, particularly during the season. You could be there 50, 60 hours a week or whatever it is. And there's not much time for sleep or academics or, heaven forbid, a social time. But by your third year, you had the Come to Jesus meeting. You're now serious about your schooling. What was it about being organized and putting your priorities in place that made life a little bit more manageable for you from all of these aspects?
It's just kind of getting a grasp on your time and putting everything in compartments where it's supposed to go, and just growing up in general. Like, okay, this is my school time, this is my football time. We practiced in the evening. They practice in the mornings now, but we practice in the evening. So kind of like you have in high school. So your classes would be during the day, and then you go to practice in the evening. So just putting yourself in position. I like to get my classes on days and have a couple of days off or a day or so off if I could. So just learning how to schedule classes, learning how to put yourself in position, learning yourself and putting yourself in position to be successful instead of just being like, oh, I'll adapt to anything. It's like, well, you might, but you might as well give yourself a chance to be successful instead of, and that includes with professors or do we like our football friendly professors, or at least not against football professors, or scheduling distance wise. Okay, well, I don't want to be over on Peabody campus and have to come all the way back to A&S in 20, 30 minutes, things like that. Just learning how to maneuver campuses, just growing up, stuff you don't have to worry about in high school that wasn't your responsibility.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like some maturity also developed during that second going into third years, and particularly your fourth and fifth years. You probably had a lot of things on lockdown, and you just had a good schedule and you were comfortable with things. Chris, did you guys have any favorite getaway spots near campus, whether to go eat or just see other students or hang out and just be away from football and be away from Magoogan from time to time?
Yeah, we used to go to there's a bowling alley in Hunter Oaks that we would go to. We had like a team bowling league. We go out there in the summers, and we go Wednesday and Friday nights, and we all go bowling. That was popular. I was off campus after my second year, so that was my retreat, would be off campus. And then we had like Satco was always popular. That Wendy's right there on the corner. We did a lot of work there. You know,
I love
and then
that.
like
You did a lot of work there. I got you.
and then like there was a group of players. So when I was in school, there was like at some point, so there was this house on Elkins that there was like 8 to 20 guys staying in at any point in time over in West Nashville, which is like the nation's now. I don't even know what they call it. You wouldn't even recognize it because this was like semi rundown. There was like maybe some shadiness going on up the street or whatever. Brown recluses, maybe, you know, just one of those type of places. But that was like the hangout. Everybody would be there at some point. Like on the weekends, everybody would end up through Elkins, and there was always like freshmen would come in, they would stay there in the summertime if they needed somewhere to stay. They put them in like gas stand in the sunroom, sleeping on. I mean, it was one of those places. Like, there's some great stories about shenanigans going on at that
Well, I
house.
was going to say, and I don't know if the statute of limitations is up because you haven't been gone that long, so you might want to careful about what you share. But
I,
didn't that house have a name? Wasn't there a name that everybody called it? I can't think of what it is.
I can't think. I think it did. I can't think of what it is. I always called it Elkins, but I think it did have a name. And there's like generations of football players that stayed in
Well,
this house.
I
You
was going
know.
to say some of these guys put it on social media. It may be on YouTube. I'll have to go back and look, but just goofing off. I mean, nothing bad, but it was just, here's where we live. Can you believe that all these football players live in this house? But well, that's it's important to get away sometimes. It's important to just not be under the pressure cooker of being over in Magoogan, 10 hours a day or whatever it was. Well, Chris, let's kind of zoom a little bit to the end of your time at Vanderbilt. Take us to the weeks or maybe a few months leading up to pro day and the actual draft. And where were you toward getting your degree at this point? Because I'm sure that the talks from home were talking about all of those things, I assume.
Yeah, I had gotten my degree in the fall or in the fall of that my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just training. Like I went in, I knew I wasn't gonna get into grad school. Not at that time. Not for to get a grad year plan. And so I saved a class. I had one class that was like Tuesday and Thursday from 1 to 2:15. So my senior year of college, I was operating almost like a pro. Like I wake up, go train, go watch film, eat. Like you guys, anybody that played, anybody was there in '07, the guys would get out of class and show up to the locker room in '07, and I'd be sitting there eating like KFC or something. They like, I hate you so much. I'd be sitting in my locker eating, waiting to go to practice, and they're like, how long have you been here? Like I've been here most of the day, man. Like, so I had a really good senior year, and I ended up graduating in December, and went to the Senior Bowl, and I think it's in either late January or February. I think it's in February after the Super Bowl. Went to Senior Bowl, waited on an invite. End up in the kind of this weird because there's like the Shrine game and then there's the Senior Bowl. So it's like, where am I going to end up at? Well, I ended up first team all conference. So I get an invite to the Senior Bowl. That was an awesome experience. Met some great dudes there that you keep track of all these guys through your career. Then I still got my helmet. I'm looking at it now with some of the guys, Mike McGlynn and Colt Brennan and guys that stickers I got on my helmet. And then you end up going to it was so funny because the Senior Bowl, the knock on Vanderbilt guys with scouts is always, is football important to them? It's like, well, I don't know if football is important to them. It's like, why? Because I went to a smart school, I can do something else. Like, well, I just don't know if it's important to you. So my agent's telling me I need to get in a fight at the Senior Bowl. So I go down to Senior Bowl and so we just start fighting in one-on-ones, fighting with these guys. So then the next day I go back to practice. The Under Armour's put like a visor on my helmet and stuff because Under Armour, this was like the beginnings of Under Armour in the football. And they had their shoes and stuff, which were awful at the time, but I still got the Under Armour visor, and it was the jersey. It was really cool, but it was that kind of whirlwind out. Then you go to the combine, which is like the toughest probably couple days of your life as trying to get drafted as a prospect because you don't get any sleep. They keep you up, MRIs and meetings with teams, and you're doing all these interviews and all this kind of stuff. So go through the combine, and then I get married in April. I get married the first week of April that year.
Well, you're packing
April
in
5th.
spring, aren't you?
Yeah.
Wow.
So April 5th I get married, and then I have So there's 21 days between the draft was the 26th that year. There's 21 days between the day I got married and the draft, and then I go to I think 15 teams in that 21-day period on team visits,
Well,
or just
wait,
catching flights.
hold on, I got to pause you because earlier your projected third round,
Right.
but clearly your draft stock has risen. You're in Mobile having a great week at the Senior Bowl. You go to the combine. Was it in Indianapolis at that time?
It was in Indianapolis. That's right.
Clearly you showed out there because you wouldn't be going to all these teams around the country if you weren't one of the first two rounds. So I don't want to misspeak, but what is your agent or what are you being told at this time about the interest in you and where you may be in the draft?
Well, they're just saying, at that point, we had a ridiculous tackle class. I think it was 10 linemen drafted in the first round that year. It was a bunch of us. So they were like, this class was good. They're like, you could be anywhere from 6 on down, because everybody knew Jake Long was going to go first from Michigan, and he was going to go either first or second. So Jake was the lock at 1, and it was kind of everybody else because he didn't even come to the Senior Bowl. And it's funny because we're friends now. We played together in St. Louis, but at that time you're kind of competing with these guys, so you kind of know all their names, and you're watching them move. You're kind of sizing them up at the combine and stuff. What do they look like, and how do they move? And so they're like, oh man, so you get close to the draft, you're like, well, it's probably going to be his first round. So we schedule the draft party and all that kind of stuff, and end up going all these visits first. And so I get married and I don't see my wife for about 3 weeks. And then,
well, I bet that was exhausting, crisscrossing the country and all these meetings.
It was, and they fly you coach too. So I remember I had a middle seat flight from Nashville to San Diego. That was fun. And
yeah,
oh man,
you really blend into that middle seat at 6'6", didn't you?
Oh man, and this is a funny story. So I remember going at that time. Matt Millen was the GM, and Rod Marinelli was the head coach of Detroit at the time. So we have pro day, and so we all go out and have a good time after pro day. Well, I get a little overserved, and my 2 front teeth are fake. I had knocked them out playing softball in college, and they still fake. So I throw up out of a cab on like the Mumbrian, get back to my apartment, and I get up and my teeth are gone. I don't know where my teeth are at, my front teeth. Oh man, where are my teeth at? So I go back, I take a cab back to the Mumbrian looking for my teeth, and they're smashed on the sidewalk. I fly to Detroit the next day. I got a draft meeting with the Lions, no front teeth.
Frankly, that may have added to some of your mystique.
Yeah, right. They're like, he's got no front teeth. So that was that's me and my wife still have a good laugh about that. So
well, Chris, you can't just fly by the fact that you knocked out your front 2 teeth playing softball in college.
Yeah.
So you got to spill. What happened?
That's Michael Reed's fault, actually. Michael Reed, ex-Commodore. I play softball with him sometimes over at Fieldstone Farms, and we had this game out there. It was like a Thursday night. It had rained all day, and they didn't drag the fields, all dirt infield. I'm like 20 at the time. Like, oh man, I'm still in my high school bag. I'm putting my body. I'm like, why are these old dudes always waving at the ball, man? Put your body in front of it. And so I put my body in front of the ground ball, and I went down, and it came up, hit me right in the mouth. And I was like, that's why the old dudes never put their bodies in front of the ball, because you're gonna eat it eventually. Yeah. So they knocked him, but I put him in a cup and all this stuff, but they couldn't save him. So, yeah.
Wow, guys, I got Chris Williams, all-world left tackle for the Commodores back in 05, 07, and first-round draft pick by the Bears. And that's where we are right now. We got a few more minutes, Chris, and I appreciate your time sharing some of your stories. But take us to your draft party. What city was it held in? Teammates there, just family? Who was at the party, if you remember?
It was here, man. I took off of Jay's inspiration really at that time, and I did it in Nashville, and I invited everybody off the team. My family came up. It used to be Bailey's on Lower Broadway was where it was at. I don't even know what that is. I think that's like maybe 12:30 something now, or where the food hall is or whatever. But so it was at Bailey's. Everybody came. it was really, really. I mean, I still get chills thinking it was just such a neat experience. You know, you sitting there and you watch yourself on TV, and it's like my agent literally got like a bag of hats. Like these are all the teams that could draft you. So it's like going through the hats, and then so I'm sitting there, and Chicago gets on the clock, and Lovie Smith had came and ate with me. We went to PF Chang's a couple of weeks before he came down. We visited. I really liked him and stuff, and so the Chicago gets on the clock, and I see my agent. I just see him in the corner talking like this, and then he grabs the hat and he gives me the phone. He's like, hey Chris, you want to? We did this Jerry Anslow and Lovie Smith. We want to drive to the, and it was just like everything just went fast after that. After that, it was just like it was really cool. My family, my wife was there, my mom, my grandfather made it up. He had never came to a game, but he made it up to the draft party. It was a really neat experience. And then you get drafted, you celebrate it, and you're immediately on the phone with Chicago press. Like I'm in like this back room in Bailey's on a landline talking to all the Chicago media.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next day we catch a flight into Chicago and go do the press conference and all that. So
Did it dawn on you before being drafted that you could end up protecting Jay again, but now on the professional level? Did that start to percolate?
no, you know, Jay was in Denver at the time. So and he had just done really, I think he had made a Pro Bowl. They were doing really well. He was up there with Shanahan. And so, you know, I'm like, I'm going to Chicago. Earl ended up getting drafted to Chicago as well, the same draft. And then I remember actually Marlon White and George Smith were up at my house in Chicago when we traded for Jay Cutler. And we had a big old party. We were all excited, like, oh man, Jay's coming to Chicago. Because at that time it was me, Earl, Jay, DJ came the next year, and then Hunter was still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were, I think, 5 on the roster at one time. 5 of you
right.
guys. Well, clearly y'all must have had a part of a section of the locker room, the smart guys or something. They had to have made some kind of fun with you guys at some point.
They had a good time. They had a good time with us, that's for sure. They had a good time with us.
I bet. And I don't want to speed through NFL, but we're kind of really focused on the Vanderbilt aspect of things.
Absolutely.
Did you feel like the coaches had prepared you for life on the field in the NFL? I don't mean being on your own and away from the game, but did it translate playing in the SEC and doing what you did those years at Vanderbilt? Did any of that prepare you, or was it really kind of starting over in the NFL, different techniques, just different?
Yeah, it prepares you to a certain extent, and then there's other parts of it that are new and nuanced because everyone in the NFL is like some freak of nature that you either have or haven't heard of. There aren't a whole lot of just dudes in the NFL. Like you got all these pass rushers, all these guys. Everybody's trying to make a living. A lot of the guys have been around a long time, grown men type of situation. So it's how you taking care of your body and really it's learning how to coach yourself. Because in the NFL, you'll have coaches. They may or may not be constant. They have techniques they want to change, things they want to mess with. But at the end of the day, you got to put yourself in the best position to succeed on Sundays. Because that's all that matters is the product you're putting on the field on Sundays. You let guys toy with your technique a whole lot, change what you got going on, then you kind of setting yourself up for failure because they're not going to get blamed for your poor play. You are. So it's a matter of just putting yourself in position and kind of creating your own regiment to be successful and being the best player you can be, because that's all that matters.
When you get drafted as a first round draft pick and you come into a historic franchise as you did, there's a lot of vets already on the team. Of course, there's the guys who came in with you like Earl, but does that put any added pressure being where you were drafted in the order, at number 14, or were you able to just kind of take it in stride? I'm a rookie, but I got to earn my keep. It's not going to be handed to me. How was your approach toward that?
Oh, just trying to figure it out. I was green as could be, and I'm thinking everybody's like college, and you kind of more of a family, and that's just not how it is. It's a business. The reality is they drafted you in the first round because they thought somebody on the team wasn't getting the job done, or you're gonna fill a void. And when they drafted you, they let somebody else go, and that guy was somebody's friend. and he got buddies there. He had been around a long time, or whatever the situation may be. So you got to earn your way into an NFL locker room. You got to earn your way into that group. And offensive line, our group in Chicago, all the groups I was in were tight groups, but especially as a rookie, they gotta see what you're about. If you're a veteran coming from another team, you put it on tape, that's one thing. But as a rookie, they're like, okay, we gotta find out this guy's gonna be throwing us under the bus or selling us out. You're gonna put the work in every day because we're gonna go out there together, and I gotta be able to count on you. If we're gonna, as an offensive line, we gotta communicate and get things done. So
Who were your quarterbacks for the Bears that first year or so?
we had Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton and
Mm-hmm.
Josh McCown. I think Josh came in with Jay.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember, he was there. Caleb Haney was there too as well. We were rookies together, and then we had. I mean, there were endless number of guys that come through the building with camp and things of that nature. So,
But here's this may be one of my more important questions. You grew up in Louisiana. You played ball in Tennessee, both in the South. Chicago's not in the South. It gets awfully cold, awfully quick, particularly where that stadium's located. Did you ever get used to that cold winter weather, particularly at Soldier Field?
uh, I guess you get used to preparing for it. You learn how to prepare for it and how to deal with it, and essentially weaponize it. I mean, you could you can still do it to this day. If you see for all the sports bettors out there, if you see a dome team from the South or a Southern team traveling up to Chicago or New England, and it's cold, them guys don't like it. I remember we had guys come, we had the Saints come up on you, and this guy's like, man, how do y'all do this? I mean, you see, we don't wear sleeves or anything. You see the D linemen, they got the thickest glove. They got so much stuff on they can't even move. Like you'll see kids in the snowsuits and they can't move. They walk around like this. The guys got so much stuff on. So you just learn how to deal with it. I remember the first time I went home back to Louisiana after being in Chicago for 2 years, and I was just like, I got off the jet bridge in New Orleans, and I was just like, it's so hot. It's like January. I'm like, why is it so hot down here? Humid. I'm getting ready to die. So you just learn how to deal with it, and it's hilarious because I didn't take my visit to Northwestern because I said it was too cold in Chicago.
Little did you know you'd be about 30 minutes away for your career.
Yeah.
The guys coming from the South have got that thin blood. They're used to that heat, that
Yeah.
humidity. But you go, I don't know if you're certainly your rookie year, you played up in Green Bay. I don't know how cold it was back then, but it probably didn't take you very long to start getting used to that northern weather. But I bet that was a transition for you.
Oh, you didn't have I didn't even know they made thermal socks. You learn about thermal. I mean, thermal everything, and it's like we always play Green Bay either we be in Green Bay either the beginning of the season or somewhere around Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So, the worst one we had was not necessarily cold, but ice. We played for the division. We ended up winning the division, I think, in 2010. We beat Minnesota. It's when the dome had collapsed in Minnesota. So we had to play at University of Minnesota's brand new stadium. And this was like in December sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Well, their field's not heated because their season's over. So we're literally playing on a skating rink. I mean, the field's frozen solid. It's in the teens maybe. And they're walking out on the field on TV timeouts with blowtorches trying to thaw the field out because it literally was a skating rink. And you always sit, we got the heated benches and stuff. So you sit there, you get warm, and you run out on the field. And as soon as you get on the field, they call TV timeout. So you stand out there for 2.5 minutes and you freeze while they're sitting there running commercials. So it was definitely an adjustment. You're trying to figure this thing out.
Well, let's in our closing few minutes, let's talk about the adjustment of retiring from the NFL. You've been playing football for the better part of almost 20 years, going back to middle school or high school, all the way through Vanderbilt, and then your years in the NFL was about 7 years or so. What was it like adjusting from no longer being part of a team, no longer having that regimented schedule? How long did it take you to adjust to life as one of us civilians, as we call it?
It took a couple years. I went through a funk, as my wife describes it. It just took a while to kind of get, because not to say no one, 99% of guys don't walk away how they wanted to, injured or run out of contract or don't get whatever it is. We write a chapter, or we write a book of like, this is how I want my career to go, and then it's like the NFL or whatever league you play in, even college, is like, no, that's not how this thing's gonna go. So just adjusting to being home, being home all the time with my family and figuring out what my next steps are going to be. And, well, do I want to work out or not work out? I'm gaining weight. What am I going to do? It's a lot. And you're going through feelings of the first couple of years when you still feel like you can help a team. That was the hardest for me, because you're sitting there trying to watch football on Sundays and it's like, man, I feel like I could help this team out or whatever. So, I was rehabbing an injury at the time. So it's a lot, man. It's like an emotional thing. You got to kind of go to counseling or talk to your pastor or whatever, pray about it, and just kind of get yourself on level ground and put it to bed at some point or another, because if not, it'll just eat your life forever.
Well, I was going to say that must be a real transition, because you're kind of, I don't know if this is the right term, but you're kind of losing part of your identity. You've
It
been known
is.
as a professional athlete for almost a decade. You're used to that lifestyle. You're used to all of the regimented schedule. And now it's like, all right, I can sleep till 10 o'clock if I want. I don't have to work out, but that's just a foreign concept to an athlete who's been in training almost his whole life. I guess my final comment on that is, clearly after some time you figured it out. You seem like you're enjoying life these days, but
Yeah. Yeah, it took a while though. It just takes a while to kind of figure out where you want to be. Everybody, you go to Vanderbilt and it's coming to an end, and you tell yourself, oh man, it's coming to an end, and I got to be ready for when this thing goes belly up, or when I get hurt, or when I don't get signed or whatever. And in your mind, you feel like you're ready, but it's kind of like a death that if you got a relative that had cancer or anything like that, and it's like you think you're ready, and then the end comes, and it's just like you're just never quite ready. So, with your NFL, you always thinking like, I'll be happy when it's over with, but you just never quite, because some of your identity is wrapped up in it, either a whole lot of it or a little bit of it, but some of it is just attached to it. So it takes a while to kind of to sort through all of that and figure out what you're going to be. And that's why a lot of guys go directly into coaching and things of that nature, just to kind of to keep themselves in and maybe ease themselves out of it.
well, Chris, I want to be respectful of your time, and I could talk to you for the next 2 or 3 hours, but you and I both have a second half of basketball we need to watch.
Yeah, it's a 4 point game. We got to focus our energy on this deal.
We do. So I'm gonna get you out of here in just a second. But guys, it has been my pleasure to have Chris on this evening, sharing his journey with us. If you're ever around Magoogan, you'll probably see Chris from time to time at practices. I don't know if you get to the games or if you just come during the week, but we sure appreciate you being on tonight and sharing your journey with us.
No, I appreciate you having me, Bernard. Let's do it again sometime. It was a good time.
Absolutely, guys. All-World Chris Williams played 05-07, or starred 05-07 for the Commodores, for getting drafted by the Bears at 14th, and played several years for the Bears, the Bills, and the Rams. Chris, thank you again. And as always, guys, get back into that Facebook group. As I've told you guys, I'm now putting all of these on podcast form. They're being housed at the library, the university's archives, as well as there's so many other things in our Facebook group that I hope you guys take advantage of what's in there. Just continuing to build our community. Thank you again, Chris. Anchor down.
Anchor down. Thanks, Bernard.